Emmanuel Gamor is a true ambassador of Africa. After having studied abroad in the United States, Emmanuel returned to his native continent to fulfill many roles here, including country manager of YouTube in Ghana and show host of the popular podcast Unpacking Africa. In today's interview, I've asked Emmanuel to share with us his unique perspective on the culture of innovation that's being fostered in a COVID-19 environment. Emmanuel, I want to start with just on a personal note. If we can just talk about you as a child of Africa, your upbringing, getting you to this place now where you're seen as somebody who is a forefront, a voice of technology in Africa. How did that start, and how did that kind of thread into where you are today?
Thanks so much, Brad. Really humbled. I appreciate the compliment, and I'm such a fan of what you do as well. So we're both from the soil, so it's good to relate with somebody who's aligned on the same path and trajectory and passionate about interventions and engagement as much as I am. So I was born in Ghana. I was born in Accra, and to parents, my dad is half Togolese, half Ghanaian, and so he spoke German, French, English, a couple of different languages. My mom is also from Ghana, but both of my parents have always been expats or traveled a lot. So I went to a Montessori school, which was great for me because it just made me appreciate the love of the arts and reading. So I guess the experiences from both at home and in school just opened my mind up even before I had the chance to travel. What helped me in high school was I created a map. And this is something that I'm starting to see, like whether we actively or inactively do that, we all create maps in our heads, loose ways that we think these are the touch points in order to get to a particular destination. And in mine, I reached out to folks that I know who are from Ghana who were also on an academic journey and found out the value of extracurricular activities and getting a scholarship. So I didn't just need to do well, I needed to do so well that my academic journey was paid for. So that meant sports, that meant leadership, that meant volunteer time and hours. I initially had a job with a bank. So I'm jogging in my neighborhood, I'm listening to radio, and I realized it's really heavy on politics and sports, and decided to curate a show that would then talk about how then can we celebrate the innovative things that people are doing. So you're listening to this radio show, but it's a series of interviews, but it's also a series of maps that people are sharing and saying, hey, this is how I started my business. This is how I'm intervening in healthcare. This is how I'm able to curate a community of different people. So I think those type of things were what led to kind of my forming this intersection of interrogating our community, intersection of sharing knowledge, and not just within one space of either academia or others, but the use of multimedia as well.
But how do you feel around what you've seen, interviewing all these people, looking at their maps, looking at where they're going? Where are we in terms of international competitiveness from an innovative perspective?
There may be two or three things that I continue to take away that started to influence me. One of them is just the identification that there's innovation everywhere. Innovation is really how the human species figures out how to do things more efficiently. And we've been doing that from cave time, whether it's been from fire, whether it's been from creating things that you can roll around, whether it's from identifying that we can industrialize learning so that it's able to scale at a much cheaper space. The thing about innovation as we know it now and expresses in tech and in products is that it needs to be commercialized, the way that there has to be a funding for it. And so innovation in itself initially becomes a costly enterprise that if you don't have the budget or the resources to explore, to test it, you're always on the back end of it. So you're never part of the contributing group of people. And the reason why I say that is because you were saying that, are we behind? How do we measure? So then for the global innovation surveys, you find out that a lot of countries, the global north countries that have resources either from war times or from early adopting of industry, benefiting from industrialized economies that are able to create value-added products and services, they have the budget to be able to test these things. So if, for example, and I'll just relate this to your audience, if we had the budget to explore the moon, for example, in that dream, the process of us would have, one, made or required us to get the best in mind on physics, astrophysics, and mathematics, to collaborate, to be together, to learn from each other. The best in mind would have had for us to think about what are the ways that you can think of the human race when you don't have access to oxygen. This process, this innovative process in of itself, is what then has created these byproducts for some of the things we have. Canned foods, sustainable ways of preserving things that would perish over a long period, because that process made people start to think outside the box. Quite a number of African scholars say that our innovation then came from liberty and freedom. So colonial influences trying to create or recreate political structures that fit our model has been the spaces that our thinking minds have been sequestered to, because that's been our major priority. So then you ask yourself, okay, cool. So if we do have innovation around us, if our thinking has been zoned into specific areas because of prioritization, because of survival, because of emancipation, because of adopting a political process that says the majority then decides how to rule everyone, and we need to have that change. What has happened to our sciences? What has happened to our arts and culture? And I love our arts because I think one of the strongest things that shows how intrinsically talented and genius we are is just our arts and culture, our music, our fashion. It doesn't take much for the rest of the world to not only validate, but to co-opt us. So when people think of maybe the China's manufacturing age of being copiers and copycat culture, where China, and that's an innovation strategy, to be able to look at have a series of steps. There's a catch-up doctrine by a professor called Kung Lee, and the copying structure until you are able to be able to create your own patents and innovate within itself is an innovation. We see so many cultures copy our dances, copy our music, co-opt our beats, copy things that are, and so you realize that in that space we have ownership. But where we need to is in the distribution, it's in the capitalization and the capital market kind of strategies. We need to localize that. So then we then are the beneficiaries of the innovation that's already there, but we have structures that can help it scale and unearth. And so then it makes me look at what are the windows of opportunity for that.
I love that you're bringing the cultural aspect into this, you know, the arts and our craft.
But the reason why I'm incredibly intentional about culture is because, one, it allows the recipient of your product to feel as if they were thought of. It allows you to have empathy. And two, it also allows whoever is selling the product to also build empathy, because you need to understand what the thinking, psyche, and being. You don't have to necessarily continue to live it, adopt it, or even agree with it. But there's a level of meet me halfway. And I think that when we think of innovation and tech, the entire purpose, at least the one that I subscribe to, is that in creating efficiency, it must be beneficial for people. And the direct link, almost like with every map, it's almost a key that you look at. And that key lets you know the metric system that's being used, the measurement that's being used, a glossary of terms that are being used. And I think the real key that we have on the continent is culture. Understanding and appreciating the diversity, taking time to express that, and making sure that culture is embedded in that. Then we start to adopt, and then we start to make our own people ambassadors of the innovation that we want to see, even before other people. And those are opportunities for scale that economically and magically start to make sense.
I want to shine a light on COVID-19 just specifically, and how we in Africa can deploy innovation in your view, and given the experience and the vast amount of people that you've met and you've traveled all over the continent. How can we use COVID-19 as an opportunity using innovation and using technology and so on, you know? Fair question.
I am so excited.
Okay, go for it.
Actually, it's really cool, and I really love your question. And so for me, COVID-19 is the right circumstances for pet projects that I've been thinking about. When I went to Davos, it was 2019, I came back and I felt a little disappointed because it seemed as if we've prioritized interventions to be at scale rather than to be rooted in the community. And so I started to recalibrate my innovative thinking and to what are the holy grails that every community must have, that then starts to tell the community, hey, we're creating, and this is also borrowed from an innovation, right? Thinking of innovation as, or innovation institutions, from academia to business, patenting to capital markets. You kind of need all of these things to be in sync, because researchers are the ones that, for all intents and purposes, they're dedicated to pushing the envelope, to asking really nitty-gritty questions. So then how we measure innovation for countries and others, how many patents, how many products and services do you have, how many research papers. But I realized what we had done was, you would have a university in the capital city or somewhere else, you would have an economic team somewhere else, you would have the agriculture and manufacturing base somewhere else, you would have folks that then end up having these migration journeys, some of what I had, because when I first came into the program, I was like, maybe immigrants and expats are able to innovate properly. Then I realized, well, maybe communities need to have a holy grail. You need to have access to knowing, for example, not just Joburg. So I'm by Sundown. In this neighborhood, I need to have access to what are the economic activities that matter? What are generally the job opportunities here? What are the educational learning journeys so that the young people who are born in here can plug into this community? What are the innovations that Santon could benefit from? So once we understand that, how do I access that? So as a local innovator, entrepreneur, I can start to focus on things that make Santon tick. And the reason why I say this in COVID is I was thinking about this last year, and it was a pet project because it had to do, and I'll tell you how it came about. There was a CEO of Microsoft that had a book about digital transformation, and he did a test in the United States and realized that rural areas in the United States didn't have as much internet access as was advertised. So you would have, and he talked about a factory in a rural area, and all of them were sharing the bandwidth that both of us are probably using in our home right now. It blew my mind because one is the United States, where they're supposed to have figured out internet access, and it's generally considered a basic need. But two, it made me think about, once you have a strategy that does not validate the community, how much missed opportunity. And so then this idea of people feeling economically disempowered, this idea of communities now having all their talent moving to cities to look for opportunities, this idea of politics now trying to say that, oh, we'll give you some funding for X, Y, Z. The truth is, we need to look or have a framework that says, now that COVID has happened, we can't travel, you can't go to another district. What is the safest hospital? Where are the medical students? There's some holy grails on economics, on food and logistics, on training. That should happen and be prioritized in every community. So now I'm asking myself in Santon, where is the knowledge base? Where do I go for the gross domestic product of just Santon? Not the country. Then how do I contribute? Because I think the thing with Manga, and I know, wait a minute, we don't have a major hospital. We have some clinics, we have a specific part of something, and we're a large manufacturing base. How then do we add value so that we're not dependent on others in a time of COVID? So for me, I think it's forced us to start to think of community and interventions differently. And then it plugs into what I was saying, because at the community level, if there's an innovation library, if there's a space that I can go to that gives me the statistics of how many banks are available, market capitalization, how many events then plug in. And I love using arts and culture because it makes it almost relatable to everyone, right? So then I can ask, if I'm a musician and I play the guitar, play the piano, how many bars and restaurants allow me to commercially sell the craft that I've been building up, the talent that I have? I should have that on my list. How many places can then expand that craft into digital services and marketing outside of the neighborhood? But as a musician, I need to have that understanding of economic value. So for me, I think that's one of the things that I try to do is and I think podcast allows for empathetic listening. you hear community people's voices and you're like, oh wait, so this is what they're doing in the community. Who's that person in my community doing that? And if that gap is not there, how are we training young people, competent people, or how are we plugging in old experience to fill in those gaps? So yeah, I think that question is actually meant for me.
You know, we need to take that on board, and we need to take this challenge seriously. But at the same time, I think there is also a real view that we can take, that we can be somewhat hopeful about the innovation that will come out of Africa.
Do you want to come help me quickly? Do me a favor and just tell me, go look over here. Well, first of all, can you sit on that, you know, just sit on the bench? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. There we go. Okay, now come have a look here, just see if I'm in the shot. Okay, so I'm going to put this on. Okay. Am I in the shot?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. There we go.